Hello my beautiful music makers. In today's video we're going to look at 5 ways we can be a little bit more creative with all those vocal samples that come bundled into your DAW and that come with various sample packs. See, sometimes you're a little bit limited when you've got a short piece of an a cappella or just a bit of an extra vocal layer to work with. I completely get that getting vocals can be one of the hardest parts of producing music, and places like Splice and the other sample libraries often offer us a little something but not quite everything we're after, and we need to be a little bit creative to make these snippets of vocal that we've got available to us go a little bit further and really have a show and a flair in our music. Let's look at 5 different things we can do with vocal samples. Use vocal samples to create rich layers and pads that sit on top of everything else. In this track here, this main vocal here,
I'd lie awake for you, sit still and wait for you. Well,
it's this sampled old vinyl kind of feel that goes across the whole track, and because of the nature of the vocal, I've got nothing else to go with it to kind of pad it out. But what I did have was these choir type recordings and sounds, and I use those as a layer to go underneath the vocal and give it more of a vocal characteristic and a bed to sit on top of.
I'd lie awake for you, sit still and wait for you. Well, I'll be waiting all night long. No matter what you do, I'll still be here for you. I couldn't have got it more wrong.
And there's not even a huge amount of processing going on them, it's just a little bit of EQ to reshape them
All night long.
and get out the main way of the vocal itself and just take the low end away.
Got it more wrong. When I saw you there first time, I thought that I would love you.
And as we progress throughout the track, we can even layer them up a little bit more.
Wait, sit still and wait.
And just build that bed up and
All
up.
night long. No matter what, I'll still be here. I couldn't have got it more wrong.
Then in context of the track, it gives that kind of vocal presence and vocal feel, especially as the track comes in, and just a nice bed for everything to sit on and harmonise with, like this.
I'll lie awake, sit still and wait. I'll be waiting all night long. I'll lie awake, sit still and wait. Well, I'll be waiting all night long. No matter what you do, I'll still be here for you. I couldn't have got it more wrong. I'll lie awake, I'll lie.
Force, hungry for the money, free course meal. I send my name for the bill. And
So in this example, this is a completely original track with original vocals recorded.
hold up, don't get lost in the source. Jedi mind tricks, don't get lost in the force. Hungry for the money, free course meal. I send my name for the bill.
But what I did here was I used another vocal sample from a vocal sample pack and pitched it down, chopped it up and rearranged it a little. And I actually turned that into the chorus mixed in with the original vocal, just to get some real juxtaposition on kind of having that sampled vocal feel in with an actual original vocal, and made it into this.
She wanna say my name with the lights off.
Say my name out loud, talking to me through hymns. Say my name out loud, oh, fair, the fire is now gone.
She wanna say my name out loud. If it's whispered and quiet, that don't count. Scream from the top of your lungs loud and proud. We go play.
And the way I've done it is really purposely looking to accentuate and kind of mangle that vocal up to make it really stand out. So it's got really heavy pitch correction on it, intentionally.
Fair, the fire is now gone.
So almost doing that T-Pain vibe, just using the stock Logic pitch corrector here, set to instant response and locking it into that pentatonic scale, so not even letting it go across the full scale of notes, but limiting it down to those 5 notes. And then it's got a layer as well.
Fair, the fire is now gone.
And I just made that using a little tiny snippet of the sampled vocal, reversing it, delaying it, and just letting it ramp up. And then the other section of it is just this.
Say my name out loud, talking to me through hymns. Say my name
So super simple, go into a nice reverb bus, really pitch corrected in, and that just gives us a nice little flip into the whole track.
Life is a choice, you better choose the right one. She wanna say my name with the lights off.
Say my name out loud, talking to me through hymns.
So let's have a look at chopping up a vocal sample and making it into a melody. For this example, to prove that we don't need to go and source epic vocal samples or go and pay for anything necessarily, I'm just going to use Logic's bass loop library, which is over here.
Paint the sky in dreams and patterns.
There you go. So there's this little lyric here. I kind of like that. Let's see what we can create with that. What I would recommend doing is bringing it into something where you can chop the sample up. If I drag over here into Logic, it can automatically drop in something called Quick Sampler, which will let me chop the sample up. It does a good job here of just finding some key parts and cutting it up. And if you've got a MIDI keyboard connected, you'll now be able to trigger those with the keyboard straight away. This can be quite a creative way. You can just come up with some ideas like that. Another great way to work is to work in the piano roll here, because we can just put everything in notes and trigger it in a loop. And when we've dropped something into the quick sampler like this, if we zoom in, it'll even show us where each slice is. I quite like that we can overlap the different notes, but there's also the possibility we might not want that to happen, in which case we would look at changing the polyphony. In this case, we can have 16 notes trigger all at once. If we reduce that down to mono, one will cut off the other. I think that works a little better for this idea. So I think we can do a bit of a call and response here. We've got this first little idea, and we can loop that into the next part. We can utilize some of the built-in effects in here, and we could do things like pitching the vocal down to, or up. Now we can take this a step further and have it so we can manipulate and adjust each individual sample and have them pitch up and down. We can do this in Logic by going to our sample like we've got here, right clicking on it, and we can do create drum machine designer track. I know we're abusing it and we're not making a drum machine designer, but once we've done that, now each chop, when we select it, has its own settings, and we can go to the individual details of each part of the sample. So if we were to copy what we had originally, works the same as it did before. But we could take something like this chop here, and we could look to pitch that down individually. That's just a couple of ideas of things you can do to maybe make an extra hook out of a vocal sample, or just an extra layer and breakdown section in your track. Okay, so here's another example of what we can do with a vocal and flipping it into being different sections. I'm just going to play this back to you, and then we'll have a look at what we've done and how it works. Right, so as you can hear, we've got a low vocal and then a high up female vocal, but actually it all comes from the exact same vocal part, which is just here. Bring it back, you can bring it back to me. And it's just an effect done with automation, essentially using a pitch control. I'll show you how I've done it. In Logic, I can just press A and that'll give me my automation lanes. So let's zoom in here and we can see what's going on. I'm sure you get the idea of the effect. So let's just take these first 2 bars where it comes into play. Bring it back, you can bring it back to me. Okay, so the way that we've done it is using a built-in effect in Logic called the pitch shift. All we're doing here is manipulating the mix between the two. So by default, when it's set to 100, we're dropping the whole effect by 12 semitones, which is 1 octave, and that's what gives this effect right here. Bring it back, you can bring it back, you see, if we take off the pitch shift, you can bring it back, you can bring it back, that's the original vocal. You can bring it back, you can bring it back, you can bring. Now, because we have a mix control, we can very seamlessly blend the two together. And you can actually hear it with the curve happen here. The lower tone starts to come back in a little sooner, making the effect pretty smooth. Bring it back to me, bring it back to me, bring it back. And that allows us to have that little juxtaposition and play around with the vocal going to the low and high like this. Back to me, baby. Back to me, yeah. Back to me, baby. Right, so in this example here, I've sampled something that I remember was from an ad. So here we are. using a couple of little techniques here. So firstly, what we can do with this part here is we've cut it so that it sits on the rhythm of the track, and we can take that a whole step further as well and make it so it really goes in with the rhythm of the drum.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs.
What I can do, if I can press E on here, and that's going to bring up the audio editor for me. And in here, I can switch on the flex editing, and you can see now what I've done to make that kind of work, right? We've got all these markers on that are sitting on the transients of the audio, and we can utilize the quantization here to have it so it sits exactly on those points. If I go up to the quantize here up in the inspector, it's the easiest place for us to see it right now. At the minute I've got it to 1/16 swing B. Let's really exaggerate this and do it 1/8. And you can see the audio shuffle around, and it's now going to have a different rhythm in terms of how it's synced to the rest of the track. Check this out.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs.
Yeah, so it gives a completely different rhythm to the track.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs.
It gives a really cool effect. Now, it works better for me in this track to be sitting on the 1/16, like so. Again, we see it change again there.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs. The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs.
And we can take this to real extremes if you want to, depending on what the audio gives you. You can do something like a 1/4 triplet. It will mangle the audio, it will give it a polyrhythm effectively.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these drugs.
And what I would suggest doing is just experimenting around with those and seeing what you can figure out. Like a 1/4 is going to mash stuff together.
The brain, the body, indeed the freedom to do can be so jeopardized by these.
I hope that gave you some real creative ideas that you can apply to the vocal samples or vocals you've recorded in your music. If you're having trouble making the vocals stand out and really sit correctly in a mix, jump to this video next as we cover that topic exclusively in there. I look forward to seeing you in that video. Take care.